Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump does a lot of complaining on Twitter, and now he's going after Twitter itself.
If you look at Twitter, I have millions and millions of people on Twitter, and it's a very good arm for me. It's great social media, but they don't treat me right. And I know for a fact, a lot of people try and follow me, and it's very hard. I have so many people coming up, they say, sir, it's so hard. They make it hard to follow.
This is just one of a series of recent comments that he's made both online and on camera that demand setting the record straight. So CNN's Daniel Dale is the man for the job. He is our resident expert on tracking the president's untruths. So, Daniel, we've got a couple claims to get through, but talk to us about what we just heard the president say about Twitter.
It's not hard to follow the president or anyone else on Twitter. You just click a button. What did happen was last year, Twitter purged fake accounts, bots, from lots of people, including myself and other reporters and other regular people. The president lost a few 100,000 followers in that purge. So that, if he wants to complain about that, that's fair enough. But there is no evidence that it is difficult to follow him. And I will note quickly that one of the telltale signs that he is about to make a false claim is if he tells a story in which someone calls him sir. So note the sir there, and note the sir in future stories.
Sir equals untruth. Tall tales. Here's another one. I have the president tweeted this today. As most people are awake, according to the polls, I won every debate, including the 3 with crooked Hillary Clinton, despite the fact that in the first debate, they modulated the sound on me and got caught. The crew looks somewhat easier than crooked, but you never know. Did he win every debate, Daniel?
No. So according to scientific polls like the ones conducted by CNN and many other news outlets, he lost every debate. And these are the polls with, random samples, margins of error, and so on. So CNN had him losing the first debate very badly, like Hillary Clinton was in the 60s. The second debate, Hillary Clinton was in the 50s. And the third debate, she was at 52. What Trump did win were junk polls that websites do to increase reader engagement. So those are the ones where you can just go and click, who do you think won the debate? And so you can just flood those sites with thousands of your followers and win those polls. And so when we're talking about scientific polls, the real polls, no, he did not win.
Okay. Trump also tweeted, people are fleeing New York like never before. If they own a business, they are twice as likely to flee. And if they are a victim of harassment by the AG of the state, like what they are doing in our great NRA, which I think will move quickly to Texas, where they are loved, ... What is he even talking about?
So there's a lot there. I'll stick to the first part, which is about people leaving New York. There are a large number of people leaving New York. In fact, according to a conservative think tank in New York, the Empire Center that follows this issue, New York lost about 1.2 million people to domestic migration. That's people leaving for other states between 2010 and 2018. But that's not the highest of all time. In the 1970s, when there were big concerns about crime and decay in New York City, the state lost more than 2 million people through that decade, sometimes 300,000 in a single year. So yes, the numbers are high, but no, this is not the all-time record.
I think like never before is another tell. Speaking of New York.
It is.
Yeah. Speaking of New York, it's one of the cities that gets a mention in this bizarro exchange with Tucker Carlson. Here's a clip.
You come to where we are now, Osaka or Tokyo, and the cities are clean. There's no graffiti. No one going to the bathroom on the street. You don't see junkies.
It's very nice, isn't it?
Very different from our cities.
Yep. Well, some of our cities.
Some of our cities. But New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, they've got a major problem
it's very sad.
With filth.
Very sad.
Why is that?
It's a phenomenon that started 2 years ago. It's disgraceful. I'm going to maybe, and I'm looking at it very seriously. We're doing some other things, as you probably noticed, like some of the very important things that we're doing now. But we're looking at it very seriously because you can't do that. You can't have what's happening where police officers are getting sick just by walking the beat. I mean, they're getting actually very sick. Where people are getting sick, where the people living there are living in hell too, although some of them have mental problems where they don't even know they're living that way. In fact, perhaps they like living that way. They can't do that. We cannot ruin our cities.
Where is that question coming from? Or just in general, that conversation?
So this is one of these Trump stories that's so hard to fact check because it seems like there are nouns missing. Like, what is it? What is that? What is the phenomena? What is he thinking very strongly of doing? And so it's hard to be definitive. It seemed like he was talking about homelessness, in which case you have to ask the question, really homelessness started 2 years ago? Of course, this is a problem that's plagued the United States for centuries, and so it's very hard to determine what the president was saying, but we know that he was incorrect in at least some way.
And then lastly, just on the nation's military, and I think I've heard him say this before, this is what he said about pay raises for the troops.
And one thing I didn't mention, you also got very nice pay raises for the last couple of years, too. Oh, you care about it. They care about that. I didn't think you noticed. Yeah, you were entitled. It was close to 10 years before you had an increase. 10 years. And we said it's time.
So you hear the roar of the crowd, Daniel, but fact check that for me.
Well, they roared for their raise, but it's not true that Trump got them their first raise in about 10 years. Members of the military have gotten a raise every year since 1961. There was a brief administrative quirk in 1983, but they essentially got a raise that year as well. So for decades, every year, including under Barack Obama, the troops got raises. What is true is that the raise this year, 2.6%, was the largest in about 10 years. It was the largest since 2010, so 9 years. And so Trump could have boasted, this is the biggest increase in about a decade. Instead, he falsely claimed this is the first increase in about a decade. And this wasn't a one-time slip of the tongue. He's done this before, including in another speech to the troops, that time in Iraq. So this is yet another repeat false claim from the president.
It is Thursday, the 4th of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. This is a special dish today because it being the 4th of July, I suppose we should have some little red, white, and blue mixed in, and wouldn't you know it? Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday special always does because, look, we're a melting pot, but it doesn't mean that you give up your identity. All right? Come on now. All right. I always like to tell people, living in a representative democracy is really living in a marriage. Do you have to give up your identity to be in the relationship? One sometimes thinks you do, and you must, but it doesn't have to be that way. One can retain their identity. And in the Platonic philosophy, you could then surround and protect each other as well. With a big capital L for love. And that's what we should be thinking about today, because we are declaring our independence not only from the slavery origins of our terrible past, but that thought, that idea, that capital L with a love that makes America great. That's what we're all celebrating. Think about it. George Takei tweeted out that he has every reason to just be pissed off at America, and he had been. Except he always holds on to that sliver of what that dream of what America can be is. the best part of equal protection and due process for all writ large. I don't know how much more you can writ it. It's more than just an ideal. It's a way of life. It's how you live. And some people just cannot stand that, because if they see that they're giving equality to someone, that they're losing something of their equality, whatever that is. As if that makes sense. But it makes sense to, I don't know, a binary mind. Look, we really need to be able to hold more than two things in our heads. Truly. I do have to say, though, that the stereotype that the right can't hold more than one or two things in their head is wrong. They can. And back when I was a punk, we called that hypocrisy. So, if you continued behaving in a particular way in spite of all the evidence and the facts of the world, because you just wanted to get your way, yeah, that was the height of hypocrisy, and that was, well, a target for ridicule and shaming. And, yeah, so there. Old sentiments die hard now, don't they? Well, it is the 4th of July, and you know what? Boycott Trump on the 4th of July today. I'm going to remind you right here at the top, you can boycott Trump with the Co's Art Expo that starts at noon on the East Coast and 9 a.m. Pacific today, right after West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, I'm honored to be included with a group of really talented artists, and I might accept the elevation of artists for poetry, and because I've done it for so long and have had some minor poet success in it. But my visual arts, I'm more than a dilettante, but I'm just honored to be included with people who are actually, shall we say, trained and inspired, and they've been able to combine all of that and make beauty. So I sometimes dabble in attempting beauty, and beauty exists in everything, right? Isn't that what Baudelaire said? Yes, he did. So, and Balzac, too. Don't forget Balzac, that murderous crook. But he wrote some good poetry, too. Yeah, what are you going to do? Well, hey, let's get back to the 4th of July. Tanks, but no tanks. Yeah, tanks on the National Mall. Right there, the Lincoln Memorial, too. What's that all about? Are these tanks going to have like Confederate flags flying on them to, honor the traditions of America? Oh, God. That's another argument that I keep hearing about. Why do we have to get rid of our monuments and, the rebel flag? People just want to, get rid of history. No, we're not trying to get rid of history, but we certainly don't want to honor traitors anymore. Thank you very much. So, I don't know. It seems right in front of the Lincoln Memorial, tanks. Okay, well, you would expect to see this in Moscow, and you do. You do. So, Trump made a Freudian slip. Yeah. Air Force One. He called Air Force One the name of another country's jet. And who would that country be? Guess. Just guess. What other, international strongman has a jet that he would fly around, and what would that name be, and what would Trump have called the Air Force One, the name of this other autocrat, strongman, mobster? A leader of his country. Yeah. You can only guess. I'll give you a hint. His first name starts with a V, like Victor, but it isn't Victor. I've been telling people for a considerable time, certainly during this guy's, Trump, his campaign when he was running for the presidency, that this guy, he doesn't care about America, and he doesn't know anything about America. So I just figured, tongue-in-cheek, that, for instance, when you learn American civics at that crash course for assets, dupes, and idiots the FSB teaches at the University of the Kremlins, that you'd expect Trump to misidentify our presidential jet for Vlad's Aircraft One. Aircraft One. I don't know. He's got a Space Force, but he can't say Air Force One. He said Aircraft One. Okay. Tanks on the National Mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Air Force One misidentified as Vlad's Aircraft One. I really think there's a message there. I really do. But, I'm a romantic, and I'm always looking for literary devices in which to, go off. And we do. Well, speaking of going off, we do have a curated show for you today. And we better tell you what it's all about. Well, at the top, the fact that the major news media can now list all of the tells that Trump tells that shows he's lying is very telling indeed. That's right. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, doctors sued North Dakota for forcing them to give patients patently false information. The White House whined that a federal judge won't let Trump lock up asylum-seekers for as long as he wants. Wow, what is this? A representative democracy? Get out of our way. Well, we won't. And Democrats escalated the feud with the White House over the Puerto Rico hurricane probe. Yeah, we're still talking about that too, and we won't ever stop because, look, something's got to be done. Justice must be served. Literally. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Amnesty International chided Poland over the government's mistreatment of judges. And an earthquake of magnitude 6.5 struck northwest of Canada's Vancouver Island late last night. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page not only a social media scroll of Twitter, you will also notice our chat room link. So, and that's really a good place to engage as well. It's very immediate. And Kelly Lincoln monitors that, and we thank you, Kelly. If you would then take a gander to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon site, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It not only helps really pay our bills and accumulate funds to purchase newish machinery to replace the workhorses that have been working like horses for all these many years, 8 to be exact. It's not only helping us pay those bills, but it could also be construed as your patriotic duty. Dare I be so forward? Yes, I would. Especially on this day of, true patriotism. The founders really tasked us to resist, as the media must. They never called it the media, but here we are. And the powers that be could be powers that shouldn't be. And that's why we have a representative democracy. Everything's rhyming here. I'm not doing it on purpose, but it's happening. And your recurring contribution assures that we are able to keep the lights on, because we will. We'll keep the light on for you. And not only help us accumulate funds to buy that newish machinery, but also to resist, as the founders originally intended. And we thank you for your generosity in assisting us to fulfill that duty, which we do out of love, by the way, with a capital L. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so easy. You can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are very thankful he does so. I take care of at Justice Putnam, because who would? And would I want him to? I don't know. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Scramble then to get the links out on social media. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Which means you can find them anywhere. Anywhere. Okay, so let's get on with this first offering. Oh, don't forget about the Boycott Trump 4th of July going on today. Please do. And do so by going to the Co's Art Expo. I'll have the link in the show notes and links diary as soon as I post. All I have now is just the announcement. The hashtag works, though. That's pretty nifty. All right. Let's get to this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And wouldn't you know it, it's Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Red, white, and blue. It's all there. I'm serious. Well, North Dakota wants to make doctors tell their patients about a procedure that's wholly unsupported by medical evidence, but who cares about that? All right? If you believe women can be witches, you're not going to believe that tetanus is going to lock your jaw. All righty? Lisa Needham of Share Blue Media brings us this here in the Bistro Cafe. The AMA, that's the American Medical Association, thinks doctors should not be forced to lie to their patients. That's why the country's largest association of physicians just sued the state of North Dakota over the state's newly passed anti-choice law. It requires doctors to tell patients that a medication abortion may be reversible. What? Physicians don't want to tell their patients that for one big reason. It's an outright lie. As the AMA said in their lawsuit, the claim medication abortions can be reversed is wholly unsupported by the best, most reliable scientific evidence. Only one doctor in North Dakota has tried the method that North Dakota now wants to impose on all doctors. The proposed method requires doctors to deliver a large dose of hormones that some studies show could result in birth defects and the near impossible event that the abortion was reversed. So if you're able to reverse the abortion somehow, you have terrible birth defects. Yeah, I'm going to say terrible. They're all terrible. It isn't just that doctors don't want to give their patients incorrect information. It is also an ethical violation for them to do so. And as the AMA put it, undermines the establishment of a relationship of trust and confidence between a patient and her physician. Yeah, but we're talking about the GOP, and they don't trust anything or anyone. The AMA is also suing over a related law in North Dakota that would require them to tell patients as part of the informed consent process that choosing to have an abortion procedure will terminate the life of a whole, separate, unique living human being. That has nothing to do with informed consent in the medical sense. That sort of informed consent is about letting patients know the possible risks of procedures, requiring doctors to convey North Dakota's conservative view on abortion ends up compelling medical providers to convey a controversial and ideological message about fetal personhood that is unmoored from medical science. I know there's all these philosophical and metaphysical questions and decisions about what the soul is and when the soul begins to exist and when it stops and if it ever does and ever has. We're talking science here. Are we talking about consciousness as a harbinger and a affirmation of what life is? Is it a beating heart? Is it the division of cells on the molecular level? Or smaller? If you believe in witches, I don't know. I've known some witches, but not in the Salem witch trial sense, shall we say. Okay? And those types of people who believe in witches so that they can kill them, science might be, maybe a little above their pay grade. Emily Singer, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Trump administration smeared a federal judge who ruled that asylum seekers can't be jailed indefinitely without due process. You know, all of that is so quaint when you're an autocrat. The idea of due process, he wants draconian measures when he wants them. He doesn't want to wait. That's not how it worked in his little mobbed up family business. Jesus, you got to get him in his wheelhouse. He's been out of his wheelhouse ever since they put him in the Oval Office. Except when, I don't know, Sergey and the others come and say hi. Well, a federal judge in Washington state ruled against the Trump administration's policy of indefinitely jailing immigrants seeking asylum at the border without a bond hearing, and the Trump administration is not happy about it. Rather than accept the decision of U.S. District Judge Marsha J. Peckman, the White House instead chose to politicize the courts, slamming the judge as an unelected supporter of open borders. No single district judge has the legitimate authority to impose his or her open border views on the country, the White House said in a statement. When it says the White House said in a statement, you know that's Stephen Miller that said it. Okay, just let's be clear. But of course, federal judges do have the authority to block policies that are before them, such as Trump's harsh treatment of immigrants fleeing violence to seek asylum in the United States. They are not illegal immigrants. They are asylum seekers. They are legal applicants in our process. I know they're brown, and there must be an invasion of them because there's millions and millions and millions of microscopic asylum seekers coming to infect us. Yeah. Okay. Well, Peckman ruled that these asylum seekers must be given a bond hearing within 7 days of requesting one. and if they do not receive a hearing in the time frame, must be released. She wrote that the plaintiff suing the Trump administration in this case established a constitutionally protected interest in their liberty, a right to due process, which includes a hearing before a neutral decision maker to assess the necessity of their detention and a likelihood of success on the merits of that issue. Now, you take that wording on the street right now. Let's say, I don't know, how about a little town in Southern Oregon? And you have them read that. They're not going to recognize that as being American. Just like they wouldn't recognize the actual Bill of Rights. They would call it some sort of socialist, commie, black, brown, I don't know, manifesto. And it hasn't just started now. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was just but a mere tyke. And you'd have a man on the street ask that question to the man on the street. And the man on the street had no idea what the Bill of Rights was. Read that wording. Written by an American judge, a federal judge, about an interest in their liberty, a right to due process, and a neutral decision maker. Trump doesn't want judges. He wants to have less judges. You know, that's also another part that they sort of messed up in that crash course on American civics that Trump took. Well, the Trump administration doesn't care about that or the suffering of human beings. Instead, they choose to whine about a binding order from a federal judge that says their treatment of immigrants at the border violates the Constitution. But everybody knows the Constitution is just a goddamn piece of paper. And the rule of law is not what a goddamn piece of paper says. The rule of law is what Herr Führer says. Crunden of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. With this hurricane season in full swing, House Democrats are ramping up a probe into the Trump administration's response to the 2017 season's impacts on Puerto Rico, arguing that the White House has refused to release the documents. Lawmakers are now threatening retaliation if the administration does not act. That latest escalation between Democratic lawmakers and Trump comes against an increasingly partisan backdrop. Disasters have seen a major uptick in intensity in recent years across virtually every part of the country, might we dare say the globe. But some areas have received more attention than others. Meanwhile, impacted communities say that congressional feuding over relief funding has had severe repercussions for those that are still waiting for aid. Members of House Oversight Committee sent a letter on the 1st of July to Acting Chief of Staff Mick the Prick Mulvaney. Any honorariums to any of these administration officials are wholly the responsibility of this reporter. This one right here speaking, not E.A. Crunden. Clear? Okay, now that we have that cleared up, well, the letter was slamming the White House's stalling on releasing documents relating to the 2017 hurricane season's impact on Puerto Rico. This comes after all Democratic members of the committee had already requested a letter in a May 6th letter that the White House turn over those documents, to which they say they have still received no response. The silence from the White House has prompted Democrats to now seek compulsory process. Ooh. Chairman Elijah E. Cummings and Environment Subcommittee Chair Harley Ruda wrote in a letter this week. These are all sternly worded letters, but there's a process here, and let's hope the process stirs up what needs to get stirred up. All right. Noting that the request comes in connection to an event linked to thousands of deaths, the official death toll from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico is just under 3,000. The lawmakers slammed the Trump administration's lack of response and laid out retaliatory measures. Since it appears the Trump administration failed in at least some respects to learn the lessons from Hurricane Katrina, and this is in the committee's letter, a sternly worded letter, by the way, our committee is considering legislative action to improve the laws governing the pre-planning of emergency contracts. And then there's a list of things that they want to do. I wish they would have one that says, and if Mick the Prick Mulvaney doesn't present the documents, he's going to congressional jail. We got one here in the basement. But of course they won't, because I suppose there's a process to get Mick the Prick to give it up. All right, let's get to our break. Actually, we're declaring independence on Independence Day from the confines of terrestrial radio breaks on their time clock. See, we already did by very many minutes. So we better get to our break. And when we come back, we're going to go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. If you find yourself at a cookout this 4th of July, gazing at the hot dogs, wondering, what exactly are they? Here's your answer.
They're just tubes of fat.
Tyler Rouse, pathologist at the Stratford General Hospital in Ontario, Canada. And I may as well give a spoiler alert before continuing this story, because
I've ruined hot dogs for many people.
A couple years back, Rouse, too, was wondering about the composition of Frank's. Given his day job,
I said, well, that's actually an easy answer to find out. We work in a lab. We make slides all day. Hot dogs are kind of the perfect shape to make into a slide. We can actually answer this question.
So he and his colleague Jordan Radigan got their hands on 3 types of dogs, a no-name brand from the supermarket, another all-beef dog, and a third from a ballpark vendor. They then took cross-sections for slides and used stains to identify different types of tissue. And they found to their surprise that most slices consisted primarily of fat globules with very little skeletal muscle, the stuff we tend to think of as meat. In fact, the no-name brand actually had more skeletal muscle than the all-beef brand. The researchers also found bits of bone and blood vessels and cartilage, even plant material. How did vegetable matter get in there?
Let me put it this way. Sometimes I get biopsies from human colons and I find vegetable matter. I'll just leave it at that.
The results were published in the Medical Journal of Australia. But there's one thing they didn't find: tissue from the lips or anuses of animals, putting to rest that urban legend, at least for this study sample. Nevertheless,
I will admit that my hot dog consumption dropped to nearly zero.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
This Civil Liberties Minute is about prison labor and a high school. I'm Bill Newman. As part of a journalism class, an Amherst, Massachusetts high school senior, Spencer Cleash, wrote a 3,000-word expose on how his school system was using prison labor, inmates at Norfolk State Prison, to reupholster the high school and middle school's auditorium seats. The school system secured that contract for a reason. Massachusetts prison labor is cheap. Prisoners are paid between 14 cents and $1 an hour, according to the Department of Corrections. This extremely well-written story puts competing interests in sharp relief. On one hand, the prisoners are being totally exploited. On the other hand, the work can teach a skill. The story has gone viral. And as a result of the expose, the school system has announced that it will no longer use prison contract labor. There's an even bigger story to this story. And that is that good, accurate, thoughtful, well-written reporting still matters. This work by young people disproves Trump's insidious pronouncements that the press is the enemy of the people. It's not. And the students at the Amherst Regional High School journalism class, as Crosby, Stills, and Nash put it, have taught us well.
Your parents well.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Do you consider the right to join and form a union of your choosing a fundamental right? The United Nations does. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1950. On that day, the United Nations formally put into force the freedom of association and protection of the right to organize. After World War II, the United Nations sought to outline the principles that it hoped would build a more just, safe, and equitable world. The International Labor Organization played a key role in that process through its affiliation with the United Nations. It was the first specialized organization to be recognized as part of the United Nations. After their convention in 1948, the International Labor Organization affirmed their commitment to workers' rights. That same year, the United Nations supported these principles as part of their Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This Declaration for Workers' Rights would become official 12 months after ratification by two nations. Norway and Sweden were those first two countries to do so. And today in labor history, this important international declaration went into full force. The United Nations Declaration read, "Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association." It went on to even more specifically guarantee workers' rights, stating clearly, everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Today, the International Labor Organization continues to coordinate international efforts to address child labor, the plight of migrant workers, and many more issues of workplace health and safety. It is one of the main collectors of international labor statistics around the world. We should all be dedicated to this simple truth. Union rights are human rights. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
On July 3rd, 2019, I'm Mark Boulanger. There are thousands of fitness workers employed in gyms around the world, and while there is much talk about the health of the clients, the conditions of the employees who work with the clients are rarely discussed. To better understand the working conditions of the gym employees, a survey was conducted in the Canadian province of Ontario. The lead researcher conducting the survey was Larry Savage, a professor at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. I asked him to describe the workers at the gym clubs.
Well, we studied gym and fitness club workers in Ontario, Canada. We didn't focus on independent contractors, but rather on direct employees. So this included personal trainers, group fitness instructors, customer service representatives, and even supervisors. Most of these workers are employed at Good Life Fitness, which is by far the largest gym chain in Canada, and it's actually the fourth largest gym chain in the world. There are over 400 Good Life locations across Canada, and 1 out of every 25 Canadians is a member. So we're talking about a good chunk of workers here.
What are some of the problems experienced by these workers you studied?
We had a survey of gym and fitness club workers in Ontario, and those workers raised a number of concerns. But unpaid work and unpaid sick days really seemed to be the two issues that really stood out. Unpaid work, that is a problem insofar as workers would report that their employers would only pay them for the actual time they spent working with clients. And so that meant they were not being paid for things like class preparation, music and choreography selection, the logging of work hours, setting up and taking down equipment, the scheduling of clients, communication with members, or what's very normal for personal trainers in the industry is what we call prospecting or client recruitment. The trainers would be expected to recruit their own clients during work time but not get paid for it. These trainers would also not get paid for putting together fitness programs. It was a problem across all sorts of gyms that was reported very widely in the survey results. The other issue of unpaid sick days was very important because in the province of Ontario, there was provincial labor law reforms that extended 2 paid sick days to all workers in Ontario, and that was repealed last fall by the Ford Conservative government. We heard from surveyed respondents now that over half of them lost those 2 paid sick days, and as a result, working while sick or injured in this industry is not uncommon. Instead, it becomes a bit of an economic imperative for lots of people. The repeal of sick days negatively impacts the health and well-being of workers in gyms and fitness clubs. That's obvious, but it also exposes clients and other workers to greater risk of viruses if gyms and fitness club workers decide to come into work sick in order to avoid loss of pay. And so some gyms and health clubs do continue to offer paid sick days, but the majority of workers are saying that they're not receiving those benefits anymore.
What kind of health and safety issues do these workers face?
There are lots of health and safety issues in the gym and fitness club industry. And in fact, the physical nature of gym and fitness club work makes workers, I think, more prone to workplace injuries. But the interesting thing about gyms and fitness clubs in Ontario is that they're considered excluded from workplace safety and insurance board coverage. That leaves workers particularly vulnerable in cases of serious accident or injury.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. I'm Mark Belanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for a high of 90. Overnight lows will remain in the mid-upper 50s, maybe even into the 60s. Daytime highs through the weekend will be hovering from the low 90s into the mid-80s. And it looks like sunny conditions will prevail. We have pretty much sunny conditions right now here at the mothership. Winds are light and variable out of the southwest, shifting in just a couple of hours out of the northwest and increasing to 5 to 10 miles per hour as it usually does, and will remain out of that direction and at that clip tonight and tomorrow, shifting ever so slightly out of the northwest and then back out of the west and then back out of the northwest through the weekend, bringing, well, a mix of warm and cold, and you never know, we might have a smattering of precipitation. Very light chance of that, but we've had that forecast before and got pretty good rain in the midst of all the sun. But it should be pretty warm. Grass pollen remains high. Air quality index is good at 16 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Locally, barometric pressure is rising at 29.83 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 81%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere at their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 80 and fair. Paris is 82 and sunny. Rome is 91 and sunny without a heat advisory. Imagine that. Kiev is 72 and fair. Kabul is 87 and fair. Hong Kong, 83 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 57 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro shrimp and grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Judges who have opposed the political hijacking of Poland's judiciary are suffering unfair discrimination, the human rights group Amnesty International said, adding to European Union pressure on the ruling nationalists. Since taking office in 2015, Poland's Eurosceptic Law and Justice Party has carried out reforms seen by critics as increasing government control over courts. Amnesty's report said judges and prosecutors have faced unfair disciplinary procedures and public criticism, particularly those who have accused Poland of backsliding on the rule of law and have approached the European Court of Justice with questions. The Polish authorities have conducted a witch hunt, working behind the scenes to intimidate and smear the Polish judges and prosecutors who have courageously protested against the political hijacking of the judiciary, said Amnesty regional researcher Barbara Shermanaskova. This harassment has to stop immediately. The government has justified the widespread judicial reforms, including how judges are appointed, by saying they are necessary to improve efficiency of the courts. Yes, of course, they have to improve the efficiency of the courts. Move them through. It's a conveyor belt. Well, their methods have had a chilling effect on many judges. The independence of judges and the judiciary is a basic guarantee for human rights. Human rights? Isn't that a quaint idea?
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An earthquake of magnitude 6.5 struck northwest of Canada's Vancouver Island, the U.S. Geological Survey said. There was no tsunami warning or immediate reports of damage or casualties in the quake, which the agency said hit at a depth of 6 miles. And I got to tell you, that's very shallow. And it was about 140 miles northwest of Port Hardy. So do take care. There could be some infrastructure damage. We'll hear about that a bit later. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio's got a broadcast on. And also, check out the Co's Art Expo. That comes up right after the show, and I'll post links on the show notes and links diary. I'll update that and also put it out on social media for you. So we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Friday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.